I was 22 years old when this occurred. I had recently graduated from college and was having trouble finding a steady job. Rent was expensive in the city where I resided, so I wound up sharing an apartment with a man named Mark. I had not known him that well. He was the friend of a friend who had to find a roommate in a hurry, and I had to find a place just as quickly. The apartment itself was all right. It was a small two-bedroom on the third floor of a brick building in a nice section of town. The living room contained an ancient brown couch, a tiny dining table, and a sliding glass door opening onto a balcony. When I first came in, Mark appeared. He was in his late 20s, did nights at a type of warehouse work, and spent the majority of his spare time in his room with the door closed. He wasn't nasty, but he wasn't friendly either. More like courteous enough to get through. I initially thought it was perfect, this guy who minding his own business. But after a while, I began to observe little things about him that didn't feel right. The way he just stared at me sometimes. Not out in the open, not where I could call him on it. But if I was in the kitchen cooking or doing laundry, I'd glance up and he'd be in the hall, slouching just a little bit around the corner, staring. And as soon as he caught my eye, he'd pretend to head for the bathroom or his room. Or the fact that his door was always locked. Always. Even when he just went to get takeout around the corner, I'd hear the deadbolt click. But I told myself it wasn't my concern. We were merely roommates, not friends. A few months in, Mark asked me if he could store some boxes in my closet. He said he didn't have enough room in his, and since mine was half empty, would I mind? I found it a bit odd, but I did not want to be obstinate, so I agreed. He piled 3 medium-sized cardboard boxes against the back of my closet and left them. Weeks passed by. Nothing. I had about forgotten they were there. Then one evening, I returned home late from a friend's house. Mark's bedroom light was out, which generally indicated that he was in bed or working. I was preparing for sleep when I saw something unusual. In the corner of my bedroom, where the bookshelf is, a soft green light pulsed. I approached and discovered that it was emanating from a small black speck on the spine of one of my books. I initially assumed that it was a novelty sticker. However, when I leaned in, I realized that it was a lens, a camera lens. My chest constricted. I slowly looked around my room, and then I saw another one. Above the curtains, a tiny hole drilled into the wall with another very faint light behind it. There were cameras. In my bedroom, my initial reaction was denial. Perhaps they weren't cameras. Perhaps I was hallucinating. But when I took the book off the shelf and flipped it over, I could see the wires trailing down into the cardboard boxes Mark had dropped into my closet. Each of them had a little hole cut into the side. My hands were trembling so hard I nearly dropped the book. I bent down and slowly pulled out one of the boxes. Trapped between old clothes and wires was a small DVR system. Recording. Mark had been recording me. For how long I had no idea. I didn't sleep that night, couldn't. I grabbed a bag and went and stayed with a friend on the other side of town. The next morning, once I had cooled down enough to think clearly, I called the police. They went to the apartment and ransacked everything. When they entered Mark's room, they discovered more equipment, hard drives, secret cameras, tiny transmitters. Some of the cameras were still in their boxes, as if he was going to install even more. But the worst of it wasn't that he'd been taping me. It was what the police discovered on his computer. Folders, dozens of them, each of them bearing various names, various dates, some of them dated years back. I had no idea who all the individuals were, former roommates perhaps, or girls he'd gone out with. I didn't care to see anymore. I didn't have to. It was sufficient to know that I had been one of them. Mark was arrested, charged with several counts of illegal surveillance and invasion of privacy. The detective informed me that they believed he had been selling some of the footage on the internet, although they were still looking into it. I slept little for weeks afterward. Any creak of my new apartment, any pale glimmer from an electronic screen, convinced me something was wrong. I covered my laptop's camera in tape. I pulled the plug on my TV at night. I tested the smoke detectors repeatedly, tracing the perimeter of their edges to be certain there were no holes. Because here's the thing, when you live with someone, you relax. You trust, even if it's only a little bit, that the walls of your own bedroom are private. Mark took that away. And even now, years later, I still find myself looking at the edges of my room, wondering if there's another small green light looking back. This happened last fall, when my girlfriend Emma and I decided to take a short trip to visit her sister in a small town a few hours from where we live. We figured instead of booking a hotel, we'd save money and get something cozy through Airbnb. I was the one who selected the location. On the ad, it seemed ideal. An old two-story house with a wraparound porch and yellow warmth emanating from the windows of the living room. The pictures displayed hardwood floors, a wooden kitchen, and a bedroom on the second floor with a ceiling fan and large dresser. It had excellent reviews, nothing but 5 stars, and it was less expensive than the hotels in the area. The only thing that struck me then was a brief statement in the listing: basement storage is off limits. I didn't give it a thought. I had slept in Airbnb before, and many hosts reserved one section for their own belongings. It was a normal thing, but as we drove up into the driveway that first night, just at sunset, the house didn't quite live up to the pictures. The paint was chipped off the porch, the shutters hung a tiny bit crooked, and the yard was grown up in spots. It wasn't awful, just a certain fatigue. And then there was the host. His name was Alan. He was already waiting on the porch when we pulled up. Tall and slightly stooped, perhaps late 50s, with thinning gray hair slicked to the side. A pressed flannel shirt worn over jeans, looking almost too neat. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. When he grasped my hand, I felt his clasp was tight, too tight. His eyes hung over us for just a second longer than usual, long enough to send the slightest shiver of unease through me. He led us in. The hallway had a hint of dust and a sweeter something, a whiff that seemed almost like melted candle wax, although I saw no candles at all. The living room consisted of a large couch in front of an old TV. The kitchen was neat but old, with worn-out cabinets and mixed dishes. The single bedroom upstairs had a big bed under a ceiling fan and a small dresser with an older-looking mirror than both of us. Then Alan halted at a solid wooden door close to the kitchen. Housed on the handle was a large padlock. He knocked on it with his knuckles and informed us, in a voice that was more terse than earlier, "This remains closed. That's my warehousing. No need for you to go down there." He did not smile this time. He only stared at us for a moment as if to confirm we got the message before continuing on and indicating the towels in the bathroom. A few minutes later, he departed, wishing us a good stay. The front door closed with a soft click behind him, and the house became quiet. Emma and I unpacked, put the kettle on, and sat on the porch for a bit. The breeze was cool, the crickets were deafening, and in the far distance, the trees danced in the evening wind. By the time we retired to bed, the stillness of the country seemed almost artificial. No cars, no voices, just quiet closing in from all directions. I awoke at midnight that first night to the faintest of sounds, a muffled thud from somewhere beneath us. I held still, pinning my ears, but it never came again. I convinced myself it was only the house settling, an old house creaking in the dark. The second evening, however, was less easy to brush off. At 2:30 a.m., I awoke again, this time to the rumble of something scraping along the floorboards beneath. Slow, heavy scrape, wood on concrete. 5 seconds, pause, and it began again. Emma rolled over next to me and breathed, "Do you hear that?" We both lay there, holding our breath, listening. The sound let up after a minute. We eventually fell back asleep, but we neither of us got any sleep in the morning. By the third evening, the mood in the house had changed, darker. Even during the day, I found myself looking over at that basement door. The padlock remained, but if I leaned in close, I could have sworn I could catch a whiff of something faint coming up through the gaps around the doorway. Stale, sour smell combined with dampness. That evening, the sounds started earlier. Midnight. At first, there was a clinking metallic sound, a faint rattling of chains. Then the footsteps, not racing or aimless, deliberate, measured. 4 or 5 paces, a hesitation, and then a few more, as if someone was walking slowly underneath. Emma held onto my arm. She breathed that she believed she had heard breathing too, low and even, rising between the footsteps. I didn't budge. I just lay there, beating heart so loudly I was certain it would alert them to us. It continued for almost an hour before ceasing. By the 4th evening, we were both tense. Emma was getting ready for bed by brushing her hair when suddenly she stood still. She inquired if the smoke alarm near the bed seemed odd. I did not notice it at first, but then I realized what she meant. In the middle of the white plastic cover was a little, perfectly circular black spot, brighter than the other parts. My gut was churning. I got on the bed, unscrewed the detector, and there was a small battery-operated camera, its green light flashing. Emma turned white. As she sat like a statue on the bed, I searched the room and discovered another lens protruding from a small hole close to the dresser mirror. Both cameras were pointing straight at the bed. That was it. In silence, we packed our bags, stuffing clothes into backpacks, not taking the time to fold anything. We left the house at once, driving to the closest gas station where we placed a call to the police. 2 officers were waiting for us. We explained everything, the sounds, the cameras, the locked basement. They accompanied us to the house. When we came in, the front door was open. From a technical standpoint, we had the right to be there, but the stillness in the house was oppressive, like the house itself was waiting silently. The officers checked the cameras, removed them, and questioned us some more. Then we took them downstairs to the basement door. To our surprise, the padlock was missing. The door was open. The odor that wafted up from below was more pungent now, sour and moist, with a whiff of something I can't identify. The officers descended with flashlights. Soon after, we heard yelling, followed by the sound of a disturbance. One of the officers yelled at us to remain where we were. When they returned, they were bringing someone up in handcuffs. It was Alan. He had been in the basement the whole time we were there, hiding, watching. In a closet in the basement, on a desk, the police discovered a monitor connected to the cameras he had installed. He had been spying on us nightly. They immediately arrested him for trespassing and invasion of privacy. My friend Emma and I made our statements, and the police vowed to turn everything over to the prosecutor. Airbnb contacted us later, attempting to oil the waters with vouchers and apologies, but it was too late. All that was important was that during those 4 nights, we slept in someone else's house with a stranger walking around downstairs from us, listening, watching, perhaps waiting for something greater. It's been months now, but Emma and I haven't stayed in another rental since. Now we insist on hotels. Even then, I continue to check every smoke alarm, every photograph frame, every corner of the room before I sleep. Because once you've seen a little black lens staring back at you from where you thought you were safe, you never actually sleep quite the same after that. I was 21 when this happened. I had just moved into my first apartment. It wasn't anything special. It was just a small 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a pretty average building. I chose it because it was affordable, close to my work, and most importantly, they allowed pets. I had just adopted a little beagle puppy named Daisy. The building was the kind of place you might overlook when driving by. It had beige siding, concrete steps leading to the front, and a faded green awning over the entrance. The hallways always smelled slightly of old carpet and someone cooking onions. It wasn't fancy, but for me, just out of school and still trying to find my way, it felt like freedom. For the first few weeks, everything was fine. My routine was simple. I'd wake up early, walk Daisy around the block, work my shift at a nearby coffee shop, then come home and spend the evening watching TV or scrolling on my phone. Most nights were uneventful. It was just me, Daisy, and the hum of the old fridge in the kitchen. But then small things started to happen. The first time, I dismissed it. I came home one afternoon and found Daisy sitting in the middle of the kitchen, whining. At first, I thought she just needed to go outside. But then I saw that her water bowl had been moved about 3 feet from where I usually kept it. I told myself maybe she had pushed it while playing. Still, it was odd because the bowl was heavy ceramic, not the kind that easily slides. A few days later, I came home and found the bathroom light on. I was sure I had turned it off before leaving, but I blamed myself again. Maybe I had been in a rush that morning. Next was the moment that dropped my stomach. One evening, after I finished a late job, I returned home at about midnight. As I approached the hallway toward my apartment, I heard something softly coming from within, like movement, but just for an instant. My initial thought was that Daisy was more than likely racing around in there, but when I opened the door, she was quietly huddled up in her bed next to the couch. I checked each room. Closet, bathroom, even beneath the bed. Zilch. The windows were secured from within. The door had remained deadbolted when I got there. I rationalized that I was merely exhausted, perhaps seeing things after a long day. But subconsciously, I could not shake the sense that something was not right. One weekend, one of my friends came over and teased me that I was being paranoid. He laughed at the story of the water bowl and lights, then said something that would linger. He said I ought to install a nanny cam for Daisy when I went to work to monitor if she was indeed the one making everything strange. I figured it was a good idea. I purchased a compact camera on the internet, camouflaged as an ordinary charger. It fit directly into the wall near the kitchen counter, facing both Daisy's space and the hallway to the bedrooms. Could stream live to my phone, and it recorded when it saw movement. For the couple of days, it didn't catch anything out of the ordinary. Just Daisy roaming about, sleeping, or barking at a strange noise outside. I began to think I was being silly for even fretting. But then came the evening that I decided to review the footage before going to bed. The recording began about 2:30 a.m. The apartment was dark. Daisy slept peacefully in bed. Nothing happened for a while. Then, precisely at 2:37, the camera detected movement. Initially, I thought perhaps it was a glitch. A shadow in the corner of the picture appeared to move. But then, slowly, from the hallway direction, someone entered the frame. It was a man. Tall and thin, dressed in dark clothes. His face was indistinct in the dim light, but I could make out the shape of his features as he moved slowly, as if he knew where all the pieces were. He didn't fumble around uncertainly like a burglar. He strode right across the living room, moving towards my bedroom door. The most frightening thing wasn't that he was there. It was that he seemed so calm. He didn't hurry. He didn't hesitate. He just went, confident, like he had done it before. Daisy had to have seen him, because in the video, she looked up as if out of nowhere and began growling, low and hesitant. The man stopped dead in his tracks, turned his head to look at her, and then, this still gives my blood a chill, he brushed a finger to his lips in a shushing motion. "And my dog." And then he continued on. The video cut out there because the camera only started recording every minute when it saw movement, and by the next segment, the room was once again empty. I can't describe the feeling that hit me. My skin was prickling, my chest tight, like I couldn't breathe. I was watching undeniable proof that someone had been inside my apartment, inside my supposed safe place, while I was asleep just a few feet away. The last and worst thought came a moment afterward. If he went to my room and the video never captured him leaving, where did he end up? I did not sleep that night. I remained awake in bed with Daisy next to me. Every light in the apartment lit up, waiting to hear anything. Every creak in the walls, every moan of the pipes made me believe he returned. The following morning, I went directly to the police. I presented them with the tape, all of it. They took it seriously, initially anyway. They asked me if I had any idea who it might be, if anyone else had a key. I told them no. The landlord, the one who swore all keys were accounted for. They vowed to step up patrols in the area, but then they informed me of something I did not wish to know. Unless they apprehended him within, or unless he did take something or injured me, there wasn't much they could do legally. I left within a week. I terminated my lease, packed up all my belongings in my car, and stayed at my parents' place until I could move into something new. To this day, I have no idea how that man gained access. The doors and windows were always kept locked. There were no signs of forced entry. The video was bad enough, but what unsettles me the most isn't what I viewed, it's what I didn't. How many nights prior to that had he been there, creeping around my house as I lay fast asleep and oblivious? Even to this day, years later, I still cannot sleep without double-checking, sometimes triple-checking every lock, and I still maintain a camera in my bedroom pointed directly at the door, just in case.